He does a pretty, yeah, but in general, I think it's pretty well presented in terms of that. I don't necessarily feel that it's imbalanced. Me, because, I don't know everything about light tanks in World War II and Nazi Germany's light tanks, so I like that little bit of text to kind of show me a little bit of the bigger picture, a little bit of the development history, a bit of the uses, because I'm not going into it knowing that already, so that is really helpful for me as, like, the newbie. It really is, so I like
Yeah.
for me, the balance works okay, but, you do see a varying amount of information in the captions, and I like that too. So some of it's like got info that, okay, an unidentified Panzer II goes along a French road. There's a motorcycle. I'm like, ah, great. And then sometimes it's that it really goes. I like that. So yeah,
Yeah.
in general, it's keeping me interested as a reader too. But yeah, this is it's pretty cool. Some of the chat has some questions about light tanks that I think would actually be answered by the chapters themselves. The little bit in the
Right.
front of each of the chapters, that text information would probably answer those questions, and it's really not long or tedious to read, which is nice because I know that that like people that play war games, they like enjoy the machines, but they don't have an encyclopedic knowledge of them. And so I think that the chapters laid out in that way would be really helpful. It was for me. I think it would be for others.
Yeah. I mean, the chapters are short and sweet, and they're essentially previews of the campaign or previews of the development of the tanks. They're not meant to be complete histories of the tanks. This is a photo book, and I am recommending it. I mean, most books I would not recommend. This is one of the few books I would recommend, and that's because generally the balance is right. So most of the captions are pertinent to the photographs. And the chapters are short and sweet. You don't want to read the chapters, go straight to the photos.
Yeah.
You're going to be very pleased with a lot of photographs, like 200 photographs is my estimate of what's in here. I mean, we should highlight some photographs we like, because I've said what really impresses me about this book, it's a photo book, and most of the photographs I've never seen before. It's really great to see new photographs, previously unpublished photographs. And some of these show some variants I haven't seen before. So we should talk about some photographs that we found particularly unusual, or just captivating.
I was really enjoying. There was I had kind of scrolled past it, but you see, like as you mentioned, how are you gonna know scrolling by if there's gonna be like unusual tanks, like weird variants or some configuration that's a little bit different? And they had a photo with extra armor added on. Let me see if I can find that.
Yeah, I remember
This was
that.
cool, and I was like, dang, I didn't know that they did those with those. So it's here. They had one of the earlier variants of a Panzer II on page 28, and you can actually see it in the photo, the extra armor added on. I was kind of scrolling by, and I was like, huh, turret looks weird. I kind of take a look, and then in the caption it does say, hey, it was actually applique armor which was added, and I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. Like, I didn't, and again, like, I'm not the expert, and I don't expect, like, if you're like, oh, Sophie didn't know it, that must be hard to find. That's not true. But I had not known or seen that prior, which was pretty cool to see.
And that is actually a super photograph, because it's actually a pretty close-up one. The tank is moving past the camera, and often the tank can then be blurry. But this is a really sharp photograph at close range of the tank, and it allows you to, I mean, you can really see the applique armor and how it's been bolted on. You've got the details of that. So it's a great illustration of the upgrade that was instituted after the invasion of Poland. Yeah, I like that photograph.
Yeah, and you can sort of see the little bits of the leaf spring suspension down on the corner. It's like, oh, this is nice, this is cool. A lot of times in these old photos, it's kind of hard to see the details of suspension. Like, you'd want to find, one existing in a museum to take a look at that, but it's nice to see such detail. That was just kind of, it sort of stuck out to me. I really like to see other vehicles. You see, like, the big half-tracks or even the smaller ones. SDK said 9 is one of my favorite vehicles from the war, and it's nice to see one of those sort of show up as well. But he also mentions, like, those other things when you see them, different cars made and the make of the car as well, which I sort of like. The other vehicles that aren't tanks that were a big part of Wehrmacht operations are also like featured by name, so if you're interested, you can go looking. Because now I'm curious. I'm like, okay, how much armor could they add onto a Panzer II in the I didn't hear about that before, so now I want to know. So it's getting me asking questions to go find out more stuff, which I think, like, for me as a learner, that's very valuable. Like, good, because sometimes you don't know what you don't know, and you don't know what to look into, and this is showing me some stuff that I didn't know that I want to go find some more out about. And the book might not have it because it's not that kind of book, but I'm gonna go find it. That's quite cool.
Well, I mean, the book does illustrate some of the really astounding variants. Like, so the Panzer I was developed into an assault vehicle with 80 millimeters of armor, and it's got interleave suspension, and the Panzer I, which is such it's a two-man tank, starts out as a tiny two-man tank with a couple of machine guns, and then it has amazing capacity for development, or at least the Germans make that capacity happen in development. And, that's an amazing differentiation between the first Panzer I and the last Panzer I. And the same for the Panzer II. I mean, Panzer II starts with a 20 millimeter cannon, and then it ends up taking a 105 millimeter howitzer. These are big jumps in utility across these variants. That's part of what makes the story of the German light tank so fascinating is how many variants the Germans squeezed out of these little platforms, way beyond what they could have possibly hoped for when the platforms were first developed.
Yeah, it mentioned some interesting things on page 55, French conversion from the French R-35 that got converted. That's really interesting. I really liked at the end. At the end, it has the chapter about that it sort of lists the different variants. I liked that as well. I didn't expect that. That's pretty cool. It puts it neatly so I can kind of keep track.
Yeah, we didn't mention, because the book formally at the beginning, it says it's Panzer I, Panzer II, 35T, 38T. But then it has a lot of these conversions of French light tanks, which are fascinating in their own way. So there's several models there that I wouldn't have expected to see in this book, but I was glad to see them because it gives you a better understanding of the variety of light tanks the Germans are actually using on the Eastern Front and in France and in the Balkans, actually. So can I give you a photograph I thought was pretty special?
Yeah, let's see.
So this is going to be page 63. 63. So I think this is fascinating. I'm not sure I've seen an example of this before. So it's that 38T with what looks to me like the turret from a 222 four-wheeled
yes.
by 4 armored car.
Yeah, it's weird.
The author himself does not claim that that's from the armored car.
No, he doesn't.
But the turret looks the same. It's got the wire mesh roof, hinged roof sections that have been swung out of the way by the crew. And that looks like a really handy combination. That's a handy conversion. 38T is a great chassis,
yes.
As we know. It's a nice, fast, nimble. It's got a square plan, so it's nice and agile. It can turn easily. Big wheels, fast, efficient transmission, and then you've got a great turret on that. So that you've got 20 millimeter cannon, and that turret is a very light turret, so it swings around very quickly, and it also has capacity for anti-aircraft use because it has such a high elevation on the cannon. So you've got a combination reconnaissance tank and anti-aircraft tank in that particular variant. So I just like that. It's a bit of a fuzzy photograph, but it's a close-up, and it shows a really rare variant.
Yeah, that's super weird. I was really surprised to see that as well. So mentions as well there's another one with a frame antenna on the outside, which is another interesting kind of add-on that was added up just below on page 63
Yeah.
after that. Yeah,
Yeah.
he mentions that. It's like, oh, that's interesting. Okay. This is something that I haven't seen done to tanks, so he mentions, like, at the very end, some chapters with the variant at the end, and he lists them, but he also goes into other stuff, like he mentions the Hetzer that he speaks with, and it's not just light tanks that he talks on as well. As you mentioned before, they have like these SPG things that were developed off of the platforms, and he goes into that as well. And there's quite a few. I wouldn't have expected like the Vespa to be in here, but there it is. So he mentions the Hetzer pretty well.
Shall we talk about the Hetzer, because that's one of my favorite variants. I mean, I think the Hetzer is. There's lots of good reasons to admire the Hetzer. It just it is such it's still extremely small, which makes it handy. So it's handy as a reconnaissance vehicle. And then the Germans have managed to put a well-sloped. So the photographs I'm looking at are from 114, page 114, 114. I think that's where the pictures of the Hetzer start. It's a really well-sloped superstructure. So it's a light tank, so you can't put thick armor on it because you're going to overload the chassis. So your armor is going to have to be really well sloped, and it's beautifully sloped. But so you know what the cost of that is. When you slope armor, you take away internal volume, and it's a light tank, so you're not going to have that much internal volume anyway. But the Germans still managed to squeeze a 75mm gun in that. It's just a fantastic design. Given the limitations of what they were working with, the 38T, I think it's a fantastic design. I mean, and you can see how superior it is to the Marder.
Yes.
The Marders on the 38T chassis, they were very tall and boxy, and they did not have rear armor or roof armor on the compartment, the fighting compartment. So they're much taller, easier to hit. Hetzer is just, you could hide it behind anything. You can hide it behind a hedge. It's just so small and handy. So in terms of what you can do with a small chassis, that's as much as you can do with it. So that's why I admire that design. And this book has several good photographs, like that one on 115. Actually, the first time I saw the photograph on 115, I thought, that's got to be a post-war reenactment. The camouflage is so perfect. The camera is really close up on the camouflage. It's an ambush scheme camouflage with the spray painted dots over mottled patches, and so you got this close up of the camouflage scheme, and then all the different Panzer Grenadiers riding on this tank. It's a rich photograph. So I haven't seen that one before. So that's one of the photographs I would sort of add to those, which I would say that these are the sorts of photographs that make the book worth buying, because there's so much detail in that photograph. And then you've got similar on page 117. You've got these close-ups of the ambush scheme camouflage, which I know some modelers would love to see, because that would be very useful for modelers.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, so Hetzer, good for the author for getting the Hetzer in, because you might have thought light tank, so it's just going to be Panzer 1, Panzer 2, but it's comprehensive. It's got all the way to the end of the war with these self-propelled gun variants.
Yeah, it shows a lot of the bigger picture, like not just light tanks, because people, it's really easy to kind of nitpick about what's a tank and what's not, but you want to show the bigger picture, which were, okay, good, so we had these particular tanks, but that platform was used for other things, and it shows the bigger picture, which I think is very important.
Yeah.
I like that he included these.
So do you have any favorite photographs, or do you want me to give you another one?
Some of them, like I said, they stick out to me for certain things. I'm a people person, and I really like to see I'll see faces and I'll see
Yeah,
sort of
yeah,
like this kind of sticks out to me because it's life. You know, like you said, these aren't staged. It's life, and I really like. There's this one on 105 that I saw earlier because it reminds me of something that somebody would take nowadays. It's just from the top of the tank, the barrel of the one that
yeah,
the photographer's standing on. Like this is just in the middle of like something. Like what is he doing? Is he? I want to know. Like is he like amateur photographer? What's he doing? Like why he has the camera and he's kind of just taking some shots here of this. But it actually is really cool because you can kind of see the crew with this like the martyr. It's open. And you can
yeah,
see sort of the layout of the sides and stuff. It's a fantastic photo for a modeler. You know, you have this tow cable in the back tied up like this. Like, this is cool. But it's also really casual. It's just taken off the back of just somebody else's vehicle in the unit here. And
yeah,
I like that. So I'll see sort of these, it's sort of the setup of the, outside of something super weird, like the stuff that we mentioned before that it looked like it has SDK of said 223 or 222 on the top. Um, it's that outside of something that's a really weird setup,
yeah,
which are quite cool. I really like these sort of things in action, so it's cool to see the different camouflage setups. You got branches, and it's nice when you can see color variation. Sometimes the author points it out, sometimes he doesn't. Um, and sort of these ones in action, so being transported or moving between spaces. Its battle photos are not always super interesting to me, but kind of like the middle. How are we getting these things around? You know, this one's broken down. You can tell by this. There was one that the author had mentioned looked like it had been subject to a fire, and therefore you can't use it. It was just left there. So you can kind of, he
hmm
points out these little things to kind of take a look at what is life with these, not just the battle aspects or the technical specifications, but life with these things. Here's one stuck in the mud, you know, here's one with a prime mover, here's, you know, moving with the rest of the unit. You can see what I liked is on, so page 101, you've got, there's a few of the tanks, and he mentions those. There's also a whole mess of trucks. So you kind of see a lot of
yeah,
the other stuff. There's whatever a tank is going, there's a whole mess of trucks somewhere behind it. You know, you have the supply, you have the recovery aspects, you have just sort of the rest of the unit's materials. It's not just tanks. And so this one shows some other vehicles in there as well. There's a Stug somewhere, right there on the left. But it's mostly you see these support stuff, which is super cool.
yeah. I mean, that I actually marked. I can prove I marked. So this is my piece of paper. I actually marked that photograph myself too. We did not confer on what the photographs were. So
No.
great minds think alike, right? Because I marked that one. There's so much going on in there. So there's four types of platform, 5 types of tank platform in that one photograph. The one thing that occurred to me is why didn't he blow that up? Turn it
Yes.
aside, because there's all the little trucks in the background. There's so much going on in there. I want to see it at a bigger size photograph. That's when you've got this is a wide camera angle photograph of an assembly area.
Yeah.
That's the photograph you need to blow up. We need to see more of that.
There's all these like kind of cars and all these different support trucks. It looks like some tents in the back as well. I'm not sure. It's hard to see. Again, like you said, a larger... I can blow it up on my computer, but it would be really great. That should be its own full-sized image.
Own page. I think it should be on across the page. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I can see oil drums. So I think there's refueling and re-ammunitioning going on at this area. I would like to see it at a higher resolution. So
Yeah.
there are quite a few interesting what I would consider operational shots. So it gives you an insight of how they were operating. That not just the propagandistic shots of them apparently dominating a battlefield or racing to battle, but actually more authentic shots about how the crews were using their tanks when they didn't realize they were being photographed at all.
Yeah, that's nice. So show me some of the other ones that you really liked.
Yeah, so I marked page 88, page 89 for similar reasons to why you just directed us to that last one. So there's 3 photographs across these 2 pages. I think we'll start with what should we start with? 89 and 89. Because these photographs are showing these long march columns. So all three photographs are showing tanks in columns with other vehicles, cars, and towed. So there's some signals vehicles and some tractors towing things. And to me, so it's showing the interesting reality of how tanks were stowed. So how did they fit everything on light tanks? So it's a particular problem with light tanks is where you fit everything that needs to be carried into battle. And these particular photographs are showing how they've secured boxes and kit bags, and they've had to find ways to tie ropes onto the tank platform itself in order to secure all these things without covering the vents over the engine compartment, because you still want your engine to ventilate. So these are, again, I'm not really a modeler, but these would be great photographs for modelers. And then there's lots of details here on how the vehicles were marked to designate certain formations. So there's 7th Panzer Division here, 20th Panzer Division. The vehicles, you've got Panzer 1s, 2s, 38Ts. So I just think these are nice overview shots. They're nice and authentic. There's just a lot of detail for you to spend time perusing, which is kind of what you want with a photo book. You don't want to be flipping your pages thinking, well, that's boring. There's nothing to study here. A lot of these photographs have a lot of detail to study. So
yeah. I like this one on 87 showing the command version up close. It's not the entire vehicle. Some of it's cut off. It's just the page before over on 87.
87.
Yeah, there. And that way you can see the details with the turret, and if I'm not mistaken, that's part of the antenna with the frame. It's not just what he's leaning his arm on. Is that not as well used as the antenna?
Right.
Yeah.
It's a radio antenna. That's a bed frame antenna. That's right.
So it's sort of like you can see these details up close, which is quite nice. Because those are kind of weird, and you don't ever really get to see those unless you were digging into the subject, because they don't have a gun on them. It has a gun, but it's not a big cannon. It's not normally what people think of when they think of tanks. So it's kind of hard to find these weird command version of tanks, and this one is really nice. It's not the whole vehicle, but it shows some really important parts. I like that.
Yeah, and actually, there's another important part. So I marked this photograph myself. I marked this photograph because it's got this cupola on it. So this is a non-standard cupola. So the Panzer I did not have a cupola initially, and the command version did not have a cupola. But there's this fairly substantial cupola. It's actually so large that it actually overlaps the structure of the vehicle itself. So it's wide. It's sticking out over the side of the structure of the vehicle. So again, this is evidence of how the platform was developed. The command tank needs a cupola. Let's add one. It's a nice detail.
Yeah, it's cool. It's nice to see. Like you said, it's nice details, and you get to see these different variants, and some of them up close have really nice detail to just the different layout of the tank itself. So
yeah,
different conditions of roads.
I know you like camouflage, so I've got one for you. 103, page 103. There's a nice Marder, a 38T Marder 3. It's got some nice camouflage detail on it, and you can see where they've thrown rope over the camouflage to tie it down. So isn't another one where you're getting details from which you can work out how they're actually adapting their vehicles for combat.
He mentions in the one just before that it was whitewashed. That's something that I would not be able to see. It's a black and white image, so I would not have thought of that this would have been whitewashed. To me, it looks like it could easily have just been a tan or something, especially he mentions it's 1943, but it's cool that he mentions that it is whitewash.
That's true. Yeah.
Because to me it looks normal, but if I'm paying extra attention to it, okay, I could see how it would be lighter than sort of the Dunkelgelb sort of standard base paint, but
Yeah. So I got a couple of variants that we haven't shown yet. So if you go over to 112, 112, there's a Vespa. So we've several times mentioned the Vespa. We haven't shown any photographs of it yet. So the Vespa is the Panzer II adapted to be a self-propelled 105 millimeter howitzer. This photograph, I like this because it's another close-up. It's showing how the vehicle has been camouflaged with maize. So this is in Russia. So it's in a maize crop, and they've thrown some maize across it to help to camouflage it. And you can also see that they've rigged a tarpaulin over the top of the fighting compartment. So the fighting compartment had no roof. They've rigged a tarpaulin. They've managed to somehow secure it around the edges, and that will obviously keep the rain out, but you can also use it for camouflage purposes. So that's a nice close-up giving you that detail. It's also an action shot, so it looks like the howitzer elevation is down. It's at maximum depression, and the commander is looking out with his binoculars over the top of the gun. So which suggests that this is being rolled as in an anti-tank or at least a direct fire roll, right? So it's going to, normally the howitzer would fire indirectly at a high elevation, parabolically, over some intervening ground, spotted by a forward observer, and the howitzer crew themselves can't see the target. They're being told where to fire. But here you've got the howitzer depressed, so it's practically level, and it could be used in direct fire. So the 105 howitzer was a serious threat to tanks with either the HE shell or the armor-piercing shot. So it gives evidence of how the Vespa could be used in a direct fire role. Right? So I'd phrase that as it gives evidence, because this could be a propagandistic shot. So the crew could be asked to pretend that you're in a direct fire role. So it's not necessarily proof of this particular vehicle in direct fire, but at least it illustrates how a Vespa would be used in a direct fire role, camouflaged, ready to go like that.
Nice.
So Vespa I'm just going to say, I mean, Vespa is like the Hetzer for me. It's like the maximum utilization of the platform's capacity. This is a Panzer II platform, starts with a 20mm cannon. What's the biggest thing you can put on it without overloading it? It's the 105mm howitzer. And this was a really handy vehicle. So this was judged as reliable, nimble, fast. It wasn't overloaded. So the Vespa is like, again, it's one of these designs where the Germans have fully utilized the platform and really got their money's worth out of it. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's okay, because we had mentioned some of the things showing different, like spaced armor, that weird cupola. So I have a question from chat for you. He's asking, at what level would those additions, such as added armor or the added cupola, when would that occur? Would that be company, battalion, division, shops, or higher in the chain to make the call to add those?
Well, it can happen at any echelon. So it could happen at base. Right? So for the Germans, their base was the factory. So they could, anytime a vehicle was damaged in battle sufficiently that it needs to be repaired back at base, it's going to be sent back to the factory, and they're going to repair it, but they're also going to upgrade it to the next standard, whatever the current standard is. So if Panzer Is went out in the field without a cupola, they get wrecked, but they're still salvageable and they can be returned to the factory. They're going to be repaired, and if at that time the standard model now has a cupola, it's going to get a cupola because you're going to upgrade it to the most recent standard. On the other hand, anybody can upgrade their vehicles in the field, and the Germans had very decentralized workshops, meaning that typically most of the repairs and the upgrades are happening at the unit level. So this is clearer in the case of the Tiger tanks, where the Tiger units, so these are battalions, they start with 2 companies and then they go to 3 companies of tanks. So you're talking about about 50 tanks. They're pretty much self-sufficient. They have their own logistics, recovery, workshops, and they will do a lot of field modifications at the unit level. So if they don't like the anti-aircraft machine gun mount, they'll just modify it in the field. They're not going to refer it back to base, ask for permission or anything like that. And that contrasts with the Allies, where their bases were the ports of entry. So, for Egypt, Middle East Command, that port of entry is Alexandria. And then for Tunisia, it's Algiers. So that if you want your tank upgraded, you're going to have to send it back to a port. And you, as in the unit, you don't have workshops. The next echelon where you can find workshops is going to be the brigade, and the brigade echelon workshops, they're normally too busy to do upgrades. So the Allied technical reports are full of complaints that upgrades, they've been ordered to upgrade and they don't have time to do these upgrades because they're too busy repairing vehicles that have been knocked out. So the upgrades just don't catch up. And that was a problem in Iraq in the 2000s and Afghanistan in the 2000s, where home authorities, British, American, they're ordering their troops in the field in Iraq and Afghanistan saying, where we found this critical survivability problem in your vehicle and you need to upgrade it. And they're like, when? We're too busy. And you put the workshops in the capital city and we're hundreds of miles away trying to operate on a 6-month rotation. When are we going to do this? So nothing changes, right? Same problems in Second World War as Operations Iraqi Freedom and Enduring Freedom. So to answer that question, you can see upgrades at any echelon in the German case. In the Western Allied case, you're pretty much only going to get modifications at the brigade echelon and higher, and you could get some field modifications which would be pretty minor by comparison. So you might, you see things like Allies, they weld handholds, right? So they have difficulty climbing on their tanks, so they'll just weld a strip of metal that they can grab onto so they can get in and off the tank quicker, things like that. You can do that at the unit level because you can go to a brigade echelon and say, can I borrow your welding equipment? You can do that. But that's not going to get you a cupola, typically.
Nice. Awesome. So some of the things that kind of I really like to see with the Vespas that they've added, you get to see them in formation, and it gives me a better idea of the layout of how these were. You can see they're quite close together, all in one big battery. There's a couple of those, and I like to see that. It sort of surprised me, but it was nice to see that it is that way, because if I've seen that before, it didn't make the same impression. I didn't think, that's that's standard or not. But I really, it's just nice. It's nice to see that in the way that the way they were used.
When you say battery, are you talking about the one on page 111?
Yes, there's one there, and then there's another one on 112.
112. Yeah, it's nice to see them lined up like that. I mean, that one on 112, they look pretty spanking new, those particular vehicles. Don't seem to be any blemishes on them. The detail on that particular photograph that I noticed was the trenches that have been dug behind the guns. If the crew can be operating those guns, and if there's any counter battery fire, they can jump in the trenches. Why would they need to leave their vehicles to jump in trenches? Because there's no overhead cover on the Vespa.
That's right.
I mean, that photograph proves the crew's adapting to a design feature of the Vespa. We have no overhead cover. There's good reasons for that, so that you've got space to stand up when you're operating the howitzer. You've got ventilation. So that it's not, it's not as if the designer was just forgetful. Oh, I forgot to give you overhead cover. there are advantages to not having overhead cover, but the disadvantage is that you're now vulnerable to shells when they fragment overhead. So the crews adapt to that by they dig trenches immediately behind their vehicles, so that if they're receiving counter battery fire, they jump in those trenches. That's the safest place for them, and they just wait it out. Nice feature, I think.
Yeah.
Nice evidence.
Yeah, it's cool to see that. I didn't see it.
Can I direct you to another one, which because we talked about French vehicles on page 113. 113, you've got these two photographs of the French Lorraine tractor, on which the Germans have adapted a Marder 1. Mm. So the Lorraine was French artillery tractor, so tracked artillery tractor, and a good one, a really good tractor. The French had good equipment. Germans capture it. They would rather have a self-propelled gun than a towed gun. And this is as self-propelled guns versions go, this is talk about maximum utilization of the capacity. I mean, what I love about this design is they just built the superstructure overhanging the side of the vehicle, right? It's a tractor. It's not wide enough to be mounting guns, really. So the Germans just build this superstructure way overhanging the sides of the vehicle, and then they can fit a really big 75 millimeter. That's the PaK 40, the standard issue anti-tank 75 millimeter anti-tank gun. They managed to fit that on a pretty small tractor. So I mean, there are disadvantages to that. So you've got some top heaviness, for instance, and the fighting compartment is still pretty cramped. But, you know, these are the tractors you've captured. Rather than build a new vehicle, let's make a new variant where we squeeze as much capacity out of it as possible. It's a very interesting design.
Yeah, these are super cool. He does a really good job including stuff like that and explaining it. This is nice. Like,
yeah, it'd be very easy to neglect a vehicle like that. It has that vehicle has a significant role to play in the German war effort, and you would think it'd be easy to neglect because it's a German vehicle originally. It's not used in the thousands; it's used in the hundreds. But that's how the Germans squeeze a lot of fighting power out of inferior resources. They're just really, really good at repurposing vehicles.
Yeah, it's cool.
But I seem to have talked a lot about my photographs, but
because I kind of, that's not really, my style. I kind of like to just stare at tanks. Like, I had, when I was very young, my father kept some copies of books, and we had, one of them was a Life magazine compilation of Nazi Germany. And it's all just photos with captions. There's some chapter in there as well. But it's kind of like, it was just nice to look. He had a couple like sort of pictorial history of World War II type of books, and it's cool. I like to see tanks that are covered in tree branches. On page 110, they've just straight up taken some trees and laid them against the side of this SPG. It's like, I like the strap connecting the helmets. I've noticed on a few of the photos how often we find helmets put on the outside of the turret. It's funny because Wargaming has some skins that are like that. Some tank skins that include helmets on the outside. There are no crews, there are no soldiers in World of Tanks at all. Not really. Outside of the garage where people are walking around, it's really World of Tanks, not World of people in tanks. But they do add these helmet details. It's really cool to see that same thing.
See the evidence for it, the real evidence for it,
and done sort of differently as well. You see them kind of laying flat, and then you have this interesting strap. Holding all of them here on 110. I like that. This is just cool. So it's nice to see a variation of how the crews are using them and how the crews are, like you said, how crews are adapting to stuff, as you mentioned with the dirt.
Yeah.
You have
I
sort
mean,
of the standard, on page 106, the standard, place to put a shovel. Or a place to put, like, a pickaxe or something, right? But then you
right.
have these non-standard stuff of, like, the tarp, as you saw on the other page, where they made themselves a bit of a roof with a tarp. Because
Yeah.
maybe it's snowing, maybe it's raining. That's really cool to see the different corn in that photograph. This one has, it looks like some long grass.